Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tony Cheevers from Researchscape, and I'm joined by Margaret Irons from Salt and Butter Marketing. To get started, I want to say thank you to John O'Dwyer and O'Dwyer's PR News for hosting us again. I think this is episode 26 or 27. So this has been a great webinar series for comms and marketing professionals. As a quick housekeeping issue, this session is being recorded and it will be written up in O'Dwyer's PR News in one of their upcoming newsletters. So real quick, Margaret, we've worked together for years. It was funny, we were just talking about work that you did is now informing work that other people are trying to do. So can you give us a quick elevator pitch about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's lovely to see you as always, Tony, and it's great to be here to share insights with this group. So I'm Margaret Irons, founder and CEO of Salt and Butter Marketing. We focus on maturing and professionalizing marketing functions in startup and growth stage companies, largely investor or private equity backed. We have there's a sort of standard set of things that happen when investors come into a growth stage company, and they're all of a sudden you go from this very fly by the seat of your pants model where everyone's working together and getting stuff done, and then all of a sudden this new sort of set of eyeballs is expecting different deliverables and different reporting and more consistency, and it can be really jarring for those marketing comms professionals who are in role. And so I come in and help work with those folks to get to that investor level quality of initiatives, programs, and work. And so that's what I do.
And I love the topic saying yes to growth starts with saying no, because I remember Jeffrey and I talk about this, that I approached him at a conference and I said, let me grow your business. And that was 11 years ago. And we said yes to everything. And we said yes to everything at crazy prices. And so what do you think are some of the signs that indicate that a leadership team is distracted by saying yes to too many initiatives?
Yeah, well, saying yes to everything is a pretty good sign that you're doing too much. I think that, all of this comes back to having an aligned and defined strategy across your leadership team. And so if your team is operating autonomously, saying yes to things, making arbitrary decisions about what is good for the company and what's not good for the company, or what should move you forward or what not move you forward, that can be a real indicator that you're distracted, because it's not actually backed up by any of the factual strategic data that you're trying to use to push your company forward. So, an example happens all the time in sales, right? You're trying to move up market, you're trying to acquire new accounts that are, higher revenue cap, larger dollar, but yet the small business comes in, the mom and pop shops, and they still need your help. They end up taking a ton of time. They're right in front of you. They end up bleeding sort of your reserves of time and effort and energy dry, because the dollars really matter to them, and you're not able to move up market because you're spending so much time in the small business world. And it happens all the time, and it doesn't come back to, if you're aligned with your leadership team that you're moving up market and that you need to go after higher revenue cap. Then when the small business comes in, the right motion is to say, thank you, I would love to work with you, but we are not pursuing these kind of accounts, but let me refer you to somebody else, right? And that's the ultimate saying no to say yes, right? Like that's the ultimate, thank you, but no thank you. I know you have dollars. I know you're here. I know you're telling me you're going to pay me, but you don't align to my strategy. And I have to say no to you in order to make sure that the strategy and the work that we're doing, the vision, comes true.
I should have mentioned at the beginning, for anybody in the audience, feel free to put questions in the Q&A, and we'll answer them on the fly. And while you were talking, Margaret, something occurred to me, so I'm going to throw you off the script question. what you said, I think is really important is that referral network. How do you develop that referral network so that you're not just saying, no, see ya, you're saying no, and yes, or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's also part of this, the sort of go-to-market strategy and go-to-market planning is understanding who your competition is, right? And understanding where you compete. And what, if you're looking at the universe of where you're selling your services or your product, you'll know, who's pursuing the big accounts, who's pursuing the small stuff, who's niche, who's more broad, and you'll be able to have sort of a landscape that you can work from, right? So, oftentimes, particularly in this growth stage, and I have been specializing in B2B services for a long time, you know, highly fragmented market, B2B tech services. You're competing with anybody from Deloitte and Accenture all the way down to, you know, two people in a garage, right? Who have a really specific skill set. So that's a huge competitor set, right? So how do you have to look at that marketplace and look at that landscape and define, okay, this is the market where I live, this is where I want to play. These are my key competitors. These are outliers. This is what that means. And that also gives you knowledge and know-how to have conversations with your potential clients, right? Like, oh, you're pursuing this kind of work. This isn't for me. You really need to go after a Deloitte or an Accenture where you're going to pay top dollar, but you're going to have a bigger breadth of resources for to help do the work that you need. Or you don't have the kind of dollars I need, but I know these very small boutique agencies that really can help you here. They really specialize in what you need. And then as one of my favorite sales leaders says, getting to an answer is the right answer, right? Yes or no, equally good. Just get to an answer as quickly as possible, because then you can move on and pursue other things. And so that competitive landscape really helps with that. And it helps reinforce what you're trying to do as your own organization in terms of moving forward.
I think that's one of the first quotes we'll take out for the article.
Good.
I like that. So people throughout the organization, you and I have talked about sales and operations, they're going to come up with new initiatives and programs. What criteria can you advise the C-suite on making sure that opportunity aligns with the go-to-market strategy or not?
So I often start at the very beginning with developing a strategy on a page, which I think is an incredible tool for companies who are looking to grow and who are looking to align. And in my view, like, that strategy on the page, not only does the leadership have to buy into it and everybody has to understand what it looks like, but and what the goals are and how and it includes everything from your vision statement to your operating vision, all the way down to who your channel partners are and what your target audiences are. And you put it all in one plate, 8.5 by 11. You can print it out and put it next to your desk if you want to. You can keep it on your screen, what have you. But it has all the really important core components of what your strategy is. And then that becomes the backbone that you test these opportunities against, right? So I worked for a company, a startup, who was really focused on fueling startup growth in highly regulated industries in the United States. We did not have a strategy on a page. And all of a sudden, we found ourselves opening an office in Dubai, which had a similar set of problems, right? A similar set of needs to develop these startups in these highly regulated industries, but it took our focus to the Middle East, took our focus totally out of what we were trying to do, because we didn't have that thing to come back to say, no, this is what we're doing. And when we hit these goals, we'll know that we've been successful, and then we can move forward and create new goals based on that success and pursue those new goals to move forward. And so as these opportunities come up, if there's nothing to give people that freedom to assess them, they will just do whatever they think is right. And that may or may not be in line with what you, the leaders of the company, think is right. So if that strategy on a page is built and shared widely, I'm a huge fan of sharing numbers, sharing goals, sharing everything. Everybody should understand where you're driving, and what's important and where your milestones are. If everyone's doing that and gets that, then your team has a little bit more autonomy to evaluate these opportunities to say no or to say yes, like, yes, this wasn't planned, but it is a good opportunity. It hits our, our core markets here. It's via this channel. It's going to fuel, our growth strategy. It's going to drive our revenue numbers, whatever the thing is. You have it all laid out, so it makes it a really easy to make the case for doing the work. And I think so few people really stop, particularly when you're growing. The energy is frenetic. Everyone's, working all the time, and there's a lot of energy and excitement. And, people don't really stop and look at how does this work that I'm doing take us further? And I think just having a pause and looking at, is this opportunity in line with where we're going, and can it help fuel our growth, or is it a distraction? Just asking that series of questions is an incredibly valuable tool that is underutilized.
So interestingly, we got a question in a Q&A from one of our referral partners. Asking, does saying yes to everything sometimes make sense early in the life of a startup because you're trying to get your foot in the door, or you're experimenting to see what your sweet spot is, or you just need the money?
Yeah. And there is a time and a place for it, right? I think that there is a version of it where you're testing and experimenting. Who's your market? What will people buy? How much will they pay for it? Like, you have to do a bunch of experiments in order to get empirical evidence that will help you figure that stuff out. So I do think that there's a time and a place for it. But once you hit a certain threshold, right? Once you hit a certain stride, particularly when you have investors coming in, they're looking for scalability, they're looking for repeatability, and they're looking for consistency, right? And so if you can't prove that out, right, that's going to be the first fly in the ointment in that relationship, right? And that can have lasting impact, right? That can mean your whole executive team goes. That can mean somebody comes in and becomes a new CEO or your new leader and starts to put you on a plan. There's all kinds of things that can happen if you can't prove out that consistency and that repeatability. So I think that, I would argue that sort of say yes to everything in the beginning, create your thesis, right? Create your pricing structure, test it, solidify it, and then use that to start that repeatable process. And once you start that repeatable process, that's when you can't say yes to everything. That's when you have to say, no, I've tested it. I know that this is the direction we should go for maximum profitability. I've identified my competitive market. I know the white space that we occupy that no one else does, where we have a competitive advantage. Drive to that. And then anything that fits outside that box is not worth your time or effort. It will distract you from your ultimate goal.
You remind me of a situation early in my career where I had a lot of salespeople reporting into me, and we came across this large 7-figure deal, and the salesperson was lobbying hard for it. I'm like, it's break even at best. So are you going to pay us the commission on this because we're going to lose money? And it was rude on my part, probably. It was like, let's focus on reality here, which sort of leads me into my next question: is how do you help your team? How do executive leaders, CEOs help their team identify and prioritize the initiatives that are going to drive sustainable growth, as opposed to, it's a big number, it's a big client, it's the Fortune 5.
Yeah, there's a sort of a sweet spot. You have to help do a little bit of the work, to give them the guardrails, the guardrails to operate against. And that really actually falls to research, right? That's understanding your competitive market, understanding your revenue goals, who your clients are, who your buyers are, having that sort of sorted out. Like, leaders can really help their teams by sharing that information widely, telling them who is the right buyer set, who's the right company, who's the right account, who is not, and helping them figure out, how to make decisions that then they can take on and do inside the company without the leaders having to participate. So that's a huge piece of it. And that really does fall to the executive team, right? That sort of market understanding. And the other piece of it is the understanding of where the growth in your industry is going, right? That's an executive leader task and operation, right? It's not only about what you're doing now, but where are the opportunities for you moving forward, and how do you drive your company towards that? The executive team has to decide that, and then they have to let everybody know what they're doing, and that will help people prioritize their initiatives. Again, like it's very simple in the end of the day, and I think it's really hard to execute, but the concept itself is really simple. Um, and the executive team has to do the work there. And what ends up happening is that if it's done well, the team that's reporting into the executives, the team that's sort of on the ground, the boots on the ground folks, they start to think, hey, I know that we're trying to do XYZ thing. I know that we have this channel partner, but this one looks very similar and has a lot of opportunities. They start to surface things that they see on the ground that the executive team doesn't have time or effort to see or energy to see because they're dealing with other problems. And so you have this great like coming together of minds where you have people who start to surface up new opportunities that could drive you to where you need to go, and the executive saying, yes, that is in line, go pursue that opportunity, make sure that happens. And so when it works really well, it's an ecosystem that fuels itself.
So I like that, when it works really well, because that leads into, are there things to avoid, pitfalls to avoid when you're encouraging yes to growth mindset, and how do you avoid that? I know I have some things in my mind, but
Yeah. I mean, one of the biggest problems I see is, particularly in startups, leaders either reticent to share information, whether it's revenue information or strategy information. People reticent to put a pen to paper and write things down. There's sort of a fear that it's once it's out there and published, you've committed to it and you can't pivot. And that's not the case. I've seen really successful companies say, this market, which has served us well, is not serving us well now, or we are driving into a different direction, and they've pivoted and gone in a different direction. I mean, Amazon.com is a great one. It started as a bookseller. No one would have thought that Amazon would be showing up at my house every single day, delivering any number of things that is well outside of the literary field, but that is where they went to, and they pivoted, but they pivoted with thought, with insight, and with data, and with direction, and with purpose. So I think that the leaders who are successful are the ones who share, who lean on their leadership teams, who lean on the expertise of the leaders that they bring on board, and help come together to a unified vision. And that really just it paves the way for just stronger initiatives, stronger programming, stronger growth, right? And it makes it easier to do what is an incredibly hard job. So I think that information sharing is the number one thing that I see that's a problem, that I think leaders can work to change.
it's very interesting because it came up twice this week, in-person meetings where people said, I was presenting data, and early in the conversation I got pushback, aggressive pushback. That doesn't align with my thinking. That doesn't align with my experience. And so you're being asked to defend the data, defend the research. And if you're trying to tell a story, you're not used to that pushback. So have you encountered that? And do you have any advice for people in that situation?
Yes, that data it's the greatest asset and can be such an Achilles heel, particularly if it flies in the face of what a team or a leader is expecting to see or hear. I actually really like data as a backstop. I think that it becomes, everybody gets to get mad at the data or the third party, but if you have 1,000 people telling you that they feel one way, it becomes very hard to argue that they don't in fact feel that way. So I often lean on data. I often bring in third party experts, like a Gartner or a Forrester, You know, there's lots of marketing sort of institutions and companies that that offer data, or I'll do, you know, specific data or research with, you know, a company like Researchscape to help drive those insights. And I think that it can be an incredibly powerful tool. And you know, what I would advocate for is, if you have a leader who says that that's not what I like, one of the things that can be very hard is to maintain your composure, because you're like, what? So I would advocate for maintaining your composure, but always drive back to the numbers, and always drive back to the growth plan, right? What's your strategy? What's your go-to-market plan? This is where you said you're going to go. This is what the data is telling us about how you can get there. That's it. You can love it or you can hate it. It doesn't matter. But this is what the data is telling us. So what you decide to do with it is on you, the leader. But we can't argue with what the data says. And I think it does help embolden some of these issues and efforts.
You know, the case study, it has to be about 15 years ago. There was a C-suite person at a major brand. You have their products in your house. I do too. And when I delved into why is the data not aligning, it came down to, when I was playing golf, the people I was playing golf with said this. I'm like, well, okay, that's a focus group of a very specific group of people, high wealth individuals who
Right.
can afford to belong to a private country club, as opposed to the people who buy your products. And we have thousands of their opinions.
Yeah.
But it says sometimes that in my world, I've seen and heard this, and it doesn't align with the data. And if you can find out what that secret message is.
With the audience of one, right? Well, I obviously, like, I know what our buyers would want, or I know how people buy. I mean, some of the research about, particularly in B2B technology and services, like about how people buy and how people research. I mean, the emphasis now on thought leadership and content marketing is so huge, because people are doing their own research, they're informing their own decisions now more and more, and talking to the companies that you would actually purchase from later and later in the buying process. And so your data has to be on point, it has to be woven into your thought leadership, it has to be unassailable, and it has to offer that perspective of what is your buying committee really wanting from you, and what kind of information they want from you. And then you know, the onus is on the team, the Marcom's team, to provide that information to make it easier for them to choose you. And you know, that's harder than it sounds.
And we could talk about timing a lot, but one of the things I want to just invite people again to answer, pose questions in the Q&A. We have got about 5 more minutes to go through some of the questions and then wrap up. So we talked about strategy, we talked about communication up and down the chain. How do you pivot? How do you change when the strategy doesn't align anymore, or you're going in a new direction? How do you identify it's the right time to have a new message, to change the strategy and communicate that in an effective way?
Yeah, there's not an easy answer here. I mean, I think ultimately it depends. But what having a solidified go-to-market strategy and plan will do, you know, is enumerate your assumptions going into that year. And, you know, we have calendar years, we have quarters, that, you know, pick your milestone. But it's really important for that leadership team to gather at a regular cadence and look at, how are you performing against your goals? What are the problems you identify? What are the challenges within that? What are the opportunities that are untapped? And figure out how to recalibrate around that plan, to either keep it moving forward or to pivot and try something else. And the real trick is figuring out how to give your initiatives enough time to understand if they're really not performing. One of the other challenges that I see, particularly in startup and growth stage companies, that there'll be a lot of effort going into kicking something off, and then 4 to 6 weeks will go by and people will be like, oh, it's not working, let's just can it and start over. And that's not enough time to really understand, if you're doing it completely, how it's going to perform, right? So giving yourself and your leadership enough time to actually execute a program, collect data, look at look at what the data is telling you, and then make a decision based on it. It can be incredibly hard to do, and oftentimes leaders will have to fight for it. But that is really how you understand how you're performing and where you need to change. And that's for broad program data. There's other things, there's channels that we have available to us. There's media relations, like is the media picking up on the thoughts, on the thought leadership that we have? Are they attracted to the concepts and the perspective that we're putting out there? If not, is that a widely accepted perspective? Is it the way that we're talking about it, or is it that nobody's interested, right? If your paid media is not performing, nobody's clicking on your stuff. Is it the words that we're using, or is it the concepts we're putting out there? So you can have these decision points within each of your, within each of your programs, but at some point, everyone has to come together and say, if we're driving towards this goal, are we continuing moving there? Have we stalled? What's causing that stall, and what do we do about it? And doing it as a leadership team is really helpful. Oftentimes the CEO or the executive team feels like they have to do it on their own and push it down. And it can be extra work to bring in your broader leadership team, but at the same time, at the end of that session, and I do a lot of these workshops with a colleague, at the end of the session, if that alignment is there's more clarity, there's more excitement about where the company's going, there's more of an opportunity to over-index into the company and perform and to try out these new strategies. And so it really breeds better behavior and more sort of camaraderie than the previous approach, which people can often just go to because it's easy.
So we talked a little bit about pitfalls and avoiding. I wonder if you can comment on how often do you encounter leadership teams that have a good idea that haven't really developed a strategy yet, versus leadership teams who have a strategy but haven't communicated it effectively, which you said is one of the key pitfalls?
Yeah, often both, or either one, sometimes both at the same time. And it really, once you start to get in, particularly when I do this go to market work, you start to get into the company, you start to ask questions about what are the assumptions they're making in terms of how they're going to work, how they're going to market, what are the goals that they have. If you start to pick that apart, you can find either that there's the sort of lack of strategic alignment piece, or that the programming is sort of not performing because they haven't really built it out entirely. And that this is another, like, getting back to our question from earlier about saying yes to everything. That's a real turning point, is when you go from saying yes to everything to see what happens, right? You cannot do each program to the fullest extent that you need to, because you're going for quantity, not quality. As we move up market, as we begin the growth stage portion of your journey, you have to be able to operate these programs completely, apply the full resources of your team against it with the thesis that it's going to do whatever it is you want it to do, drive revenue, add customers, move your brand up, positioning, improve it, whatever the thing is. But you have to go whole hog with metrics defined at the beginning to see if that works. And so transitioning from that mindset of, well, we'll just slap it together and move it on forward, to, no, I have to put a plan together. I have to, put a stake in the ground and say, this is what we're going to do, and this is what I'm going to give you, and then prove it out. It can be a total mindset shift. And oftentimes that's when you see people move in and out of an organization. There are certain people who thrive in that let's do it all environment, and there are certain people who thrive in that let's get focused, let's get down to business, let's dot our I's and cross our T's and move us forward. And so it can be a real pivotal moment in terms of your team as well as your growth.
Well, we've talked about research a couple times. Our research shows that people love to stay engaged on these sessions for about 30 to 35 minutes. We're at roughly 30 minutes. So I'm going to ask people one more time if they'd like to pose any questions, and thank you for the questions that came in so far. I'm going to say that next month, we're going to be talking to Ayanna Anderson and Jasmine Eusebio on the work that they've done on diversity, inclusion, and belonging for their agency, Highwire PR. And that will be aligned with Women's History Month and some of the work that is being done by the National Women's Hall of Fame. This session, as I mentioned at the beginning, is being recorded and it'll be written up in O'Dwyer's PR News in an upcoming newsletter. So with that said, Margaret, if people want to learn more, if they want to talk more about this, how can they reach out to you? What's the
Yes.
best?
Feel free to reach me. My email is margaret@saltandbuttermarketing.com. Or you can find me on LinkedIn, Margaret Irons. And I'd be happy to, for those who are interested, do a quick audit session of your go-to-market plan, help poke holes. Tony and I were talking earlier, and it's so marketing communications can be a very lonely space. You're often a solo operative in a company. So if you want a backstop or a thought partner, I'm happy to do that. And just reference this webinar in your note, and that will set something up.
Yes, I've got a question, sorry, a comment, not a question. This has been valuable and so worth our time. Thank you. So that kudos to you, Margaret.
Thank you.
And I think it's important because I have heard from so many ad agency side people that people come to them looking for campaigns and slogans and different things, and they don't start with strategy. They don't ask for strategy when that's what they need.
Everybody says, I want a website. And then you say, well, what do you want your website to do? Well, I need a website. Well, what do you want your website to do? Who do you want your website to talk to? How do you want the people that you want to talk to use your website? Those are the questions you need to answer. If you can answer that question, then the website's not a problem. But it's starting with not starting with the deliverable, but starting with the information behind it is the really important part.
Yeah, the user experience can come later.
Exactly. So
this has been great. Thank you so much. And again, everybody online, the session's been recorded, so we will have a recording out to you probably within a few hours, no later than tomorrow. And it'll be written up in an upcoming edition of O'Dwyer's newsletter. And Margaret, they will reach out to you for quotes. I know I pulled out one thing at the beginning about getting to an answer is better than
yes, get to yes or no. Any answer is a good answer. Just get to one quickly.
Perfect. Well, that's a great note to end on, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks for having me. Great to see you.
You too. Take care. Bye now.